20 minutes early.
Good afternoon and welcome to the City of Oak Harbor workshop for November 20th. I am Beth Munns, Mayor Pro Tem.
Bill Larson, City Council.
Joel Servadius, City Council.
Jim Wiesner, City Council.
Blaine Omar, City Administrator.
And Steve Powers, Director of Development Services.
And we have a number of staff members also attending in the audience. Go ahead.
Patricia Stoll, Finance Director. Nikki Sources, City Attorney.
Mayor, Fire Chief.
Emma House, Human Resources.
Brett Arvidsson, Public Works.
Thank you very much. And the first item is, whoa, he's in the seat, hot seat. Development Services, please.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council. This agenda item is intended to give the council kind of a drive-by 30,000-foot level view of the development review process, and then also move right into sort of a high-level briefing on the results of the Kaizen study that the city staff engaged in earlier this year. And we married these two topics together because over the last several months, maybe almost a year, the council at different times has expressed some interest and had some questions about the development review process. So that's what we're going to try to cover here quickly for you this evening. I'm going to touch upon real fast what the different types are with respect to permits, some of the basic steps, processing time, and a flow chart that tries to simplify the process for you. We'll see whether that's successful or not. And then move right into the Kaizen study, the process that the staff underwent, the results, and what we see as a sort of the post-study steps. So hopefully this is starting to become a little familiar to you. We've been talking about this here recently. In terms of permits, there are four basic types of review ranging from type 1 to type 4, one being the most simple of permits. Think building permit, water heater permit, plumbing permit. Those are administrative, approved by staff. Type 2 are more complex, for instance, site plans, but they're still administrative, and the process I'm going to talk about later on is actually modeled on the type 2. Type 3 are those conditional use permits that our hearing examiner takes care of for the city. Those are, again, conditional uses and variances. And then type 4 are the preliminary plats, planned residential developments, and more intense site plans. And those can be either before the hearing examiner or the planning commission with the decision by the council. So common to certainly the type 2 reviews and to some degree the type 3s are these basic steps here. And the most basic step is the informal inquiries. Those may or may not happen, but sometimes we think of them as the pre-application. This is when someone's just gathering information, maybe testing the waters. Again, we might get a lot of inquiry on one subject, we might not get any, or we might just get a few. It really depends upon the applicant and their sophistication in most cases. The five main steps, though, once we get beyond that, are the pre-app, the formal application, in this case a site plan, something called civil plans. Sometimes you might hear them referred to as utility plans or even engineering plans, building plans, and then permits, inspections, and occupancy. Those are the basic steps. Three of these things could actually be happening together, number 2, 3, and 4, and that's by design in our code. And so if the applicant wishes, we have the ability to process their site plan, their civil plans, and their building plans all at one time. The obvious benefit to them if they chose to do that, and if things go well, is that it's a time saver. The obvious downside is that if something needs to be significantly changed in one set of drawings, it likely has a ripple effect into others. So there are some pluses and minuses. Probably the question that I get the most from applicants, engineers, owners, elected officials is processing time. How long does it take? And I say this without any degree of being sarcastic. It depends. What are those factors that influence it? Well, on the staff side, we have the state law and the municipal code that set timeframes or review clock, and hold on to that phrase for a moment, please. Also influencing that is ours and our outside consultants' workload. So the more projects we have in the queue, the more challenging it can be to do things in what is perceived as a timely process or timely manner. But then also the applicant's consultant workload also affects the review time. And I have a graphic on that in just a moment. So the review clock. The visual that I can conjure up for you is when you see on TV and they're playing tournament chess and they hit the clock when they've made their move and now the other person's on the clock. That's the kind of back and forth that we have between ourselves and the applicants. So it starts when we get something to review, we stop it when we're done and we send them comments. If the clock does not run while the applicant has those materials. So what does that look like graphically? Kind of like this. The city is the yellow rectangles and the applicant is the light blue ovals. And you can see that we've got an overall timeline across the bottom. We've got a chunk of that time that's prescribed by law in our workload, and then the applicant has it for a period of time. The biggest problem for us is we can never guess when they're going to come back with their resubmit. Might be a matter of days, could be a matter of months, and we've gone almost a year in between certain kinds of submittals. So that's a quick overview of the timing. Here, yes?
Question on that one, is the bottom line then total review time the end all be all for us as far as statute, or what drives?
Yes, and again, but the total review, well, two ways to answer that question. The total review time is the combination of our statutory time plus whatever time the applicant takes.
Right.
For most reviews, we have an obligation under state law and our code to complete it within 120 days from the date that we have something called a technically complete application. That 120 days only applies to the time that we have it to work on. It does not count the applicant's time because we have no ability to control that. Yeah. This is the simplified flowchart for the type 2 review process, and let's see which one is the laser. Here we go. Okay, so using the screen behind Mr. Oborn here, these top 3 boxes in this sort of light green, those represent the pre-application process, and we're going to get through that pre-application. The blue column here in the middle, that really represents our site plan process. Off to the side here, these are the civil plans. Off to this side are the building plans. You'll see a heavy outline around this box and this dashed line here. If someone is processing their plans concurrently, by our code, we cannot approve either their civil plans or their building plans until the site plan is approved. And if you think about it, that makes sense. The site plan controls how things are organized on that particular piece of property. And it doesn't make sense for us to start approving utility plans to be building on that site until everything is sort of nailed down in terms of the site plan. Just to touch upon the rest of the main big steps, and I'll come back and fill in the gaps. Eventually, these are all going to come together. We're going to get civil permits and building permits issued. Then we're going to have a pre-construction meeting with them if that's a project that requires it. They're going to do a whole bunch of building. During the time, we'll be doing inspections. Eventually, we'll get to a point of final inspection, final approval, and final occupancy. Off here to the side is a category we refer to as additional plans. Those could be fire alarm plans, sprinkler plans, irrigation plans, demolition plans. Not all of those are required for every project that we do. That's why they're kind of floating out there to the side. If they are necessary, they typically start to be submitted at about the time that we're seeing the building plans. So let's back up and go into just a touch more detail. After the pre-app, and we sincerely hope that they do a pre-app with us, the applicant's going to come back with their formal application. Quite a bit more information is also going to be supported by a variety of engineering studies. We're going to go through a review called technically complete. It's a term of art. It's in the state law. It's in the city code. It means that we've determined that application is complete for the purposes of processing. We have everything we need to get this thing started. And that has significance because that's when our 120-day clock starts, is when we make that determination. Staff is going to review the site plan. Under our old process, we then had something called an in-house meeting, which meant that we all got together and talked about what we thought about the project in preparation for meeting with the applicant, in which then we shared our review comments with them. And likely they were going to have to submit a revised site plan. It's almost impossible to do it 100% correct the first time through. And then eventually we'll get to a staff approval of the site plan. Civil plans and building plans do not have this technically complete review, but they still need to have a complete application. We're going to do the same thing, although we don't necessarily have meetings with them on civil plans or on building plans unless it's a necessity.
Mr. Powers?
Yes.
On the technically complete, do they know that day? I mean, do you let them know that, I mean, they've done the applicant, you're just looking it over, and you say, no, this has got to go back before we can look at it?
Yes, what we
Or-
do is we
okay.
communicate in writing with them
Okay.
to let them know that their application is either A, technically complete, and we're going to start our processing, or B, it is technically incomplete, and then we have an obligation to tell them the things which are missing.
Okay.
So that they know what they have to do in order to make it a complete application.
All right, thank you very much.
Yes.
Is there any kind of a standard we have between submittal and technically complete, like a timeline?
We have only 28 days under state law and under our code.
Regardless of the application?
Regardless of the application, right? So if it's a really complex application, it might take a lot of that time. If it's a relatively simple application, it shouldn't take anywhere near that amount of time. But again, that's prescribed in 3670B, which is where all the permit reform stuff was from a good number of years ago. So what are the challenges that we've identified as part of this process, particularly as part of what happened during the lean process? And I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but I got to give you a little bit of context. The lean or the Kaizen review process was focused on how do we make the site plan review process better, okay? And so as part of that, the group of team from the Development Services Department, from engineering, identified some of the shortcomings that we see in the process. So let's start right up here at the top. Right now, the PreApp is optional. Pluses and minuses to that, but it seems like it's a missed opportunity if not everybody takes advantage of the PreApp. We currently charge a fee. That fee is credited towards your site plan application fee, so there's sort of an incentive there. But is the fee a barrier in it amongst itself? And that's not something that we actually have an answer to yet, but it's something that we are continuing to think about. Technically complete review has historically been done primarily by development services staff. From time to time, we would try to call over one of our engineering staff since the time they've been out of the building and say, hey, we think maybe we need your help looking at this. And so we've identified, though, that maybe that process of it being mostly development services staff, we may not have been meeting all of the needs of our fellow departments. And honestly, I think sometimes we tried to get those done too quickly. We are too accommodating to try to get things into the process as quickly as we can, because we are actually trying to get to the end point as quickly as we can. So that was identified as a potential problem. One of our bigger problems, represented by this series of circular arrows there, is that we have a lot of applications that have multiple resubmittals of their site plan and engineering plans. That's been our norm. It's resulted in design by review in some cases where maybe we're getting things which aren't quite really ready for us, and so we provide 10 pages of comments, and that helps you figure out as a consulting engineer what you need to be doing with your plans. And it's certainly inefficient for us as well as for the applicant. Multiple meetings per week were the norm. These in-house and staff applicant meetings, if we have multiple projects going at one time, which is almost always the circumstance, we might be having 2 or 3 of these in-house meetings and staff applicant meetings scattered in the course of a week. That coupled with a regular meeting that we had every Monday between development services and engineering, we had a handful of meetings every week, which didn't seem like we were using our time as efficiently as what we could. So those were some of the, there certainly are other things that we think that we can improve, but those are some of the big ticket items that were identified in the Kaizen process. So that takes me to this. So really, what is Kaizen or lean? There's some definitions out there for public sector or for private sector, some for public sector. From a government perspective, it helps break down complex processes into individual steps. This leads to innovation, new ways of making existing work more efficient and customer focused, and frankly a little more enjoyable for your staff because it's a smoother process. This was something that the city felt strongly about undertaking with the support of the mayor's office and Blaine's office. It's administered by the state auditor's office. They have a lady who goes around the state training people in this and putting organizations through this process. City of Oak Harbor had the opportunity to do that July 15th through 19th of this year. And our focus, as I mentioned earlier, was looking at this type 2 review process. Why did we choose that one? two big reasons. One, because we do an awful lot of those reviews. And so that's the lion's share of our work in this kind of area. And secondly, because since the process is similar to lots of other ones, we thought that we could take the lessons learned from this one and apply it to some of our other review processes. So that's why Kathy Rosen and I chose this as the thing that we should have our staffs look at. So who participated? Well, they have different levels of sponsors and participants. At the executive team, it was the mayor and the city administrator. The direct level sponsors were Mrs. Rosen and myself. Our staff participants were from Public Works Engineering and Development Services, and then we had Human Resource Director on hand as well because it's a training, also because she has experience in the lean process in other places. And what were our goals? Well, we wanted to improve the efficiency of our reviews. We wanted to reduce review times. And we were also looking to find ways to improve the communication between the staff, the applicant, and frankly, yourselves. We wanted to learn from this so we could tell you more about how we're trying to improve this process. So the results. These were generated by the staff. These were not the mayor and city administrator's results. They're not Mrs. Rosen and my results. They are from the staff who participated in this week-long process. And so the first thing they suggested was creating this something called the unified meeting. This is going to do away with our former weekly meeting, project meetings, separate staff in-house, separate staff applicant meetings, consolidates it all into one day a week. So on Tuesday mornings, everybody who normally participates in this blocks out their calendar from 9 till 12, I think it is. Now, we certainly don't need all that time every week. Sometimes it's really short, sometimes it's really long, but we only have to do it once a week. So that meeting includes the appropriate staff. There's a written agenda. We try to assign time to it. And when we have the need to meet with an applicant, they'll be at that meeting and they'll be first on the list. And then we'll take care of the rest of the staff stuff after that. A key part of implementing that recommendation was identifying the project manager role. And by, I think, unanimous consent, they thought that the best person to administer that was the associate planner, who downstairs in my office is the one who gets the vast majority of all of these types of reviews, and he's in the best position to be the coordinator between, on this kind of level, between the staff as well as the applicant and their consulting team. He also runs the unified meetings, and as I've said, coordinates with the applicants on certain special kinds of topics. This was a huge one. I think unanimously the staff participants thought that we needed to increase the importance of the technically complete review. A couple of different ways we're going to do that. Though we're going to do that in that unified meeting. We've got the right people in the room. That way we make sure all the disciplines are represented. Everybody puts eyes on the plans at the same time. Now, we may not get it all done in one meeting because there may be, somebody might take a piece of it back and study it for just a bit. So we're going to put it on the agenda for the following week. We're still well within our 28 days, and it's frankly probably more focused than what we were able to achieve before in sort of an ad hoc fashion. The second big piece of this, so the first piece was making sure we got the right people involved. The second big piece, we're going to be more discerning in what we accept. Now, some might view that as us becoming too hard-nosed or hard-line, and I want to disavow that idea right now. What we're really trying to do is to make sure that the applicant is really ready to start the process as well. So it's both us be ready for them and them being ready to be in the process. That way, only plans which are ready for review are accepted. We want to strike a balance between a helpful attitude and starting the review too soon. And our goal here, and we do believe this is an actual byproduct that we can get, is it should reduce the amount of resubmittals that we see in the process. Because if you start with a more complete set of plans, you likely won't have to resubmit as many times. Increased use of technology. This is something that I think when you looked at the memo that was provided by the state auditor's office, she made note of sort of a lack of technology helping us in this process. So we're going to increase our use of technology for the submittal of plans, the review of plans, and tracking of projects. That's already well underway on the submittal side. We're implementing a new software process called, review side and submittal, something called Bluebeam, which is used in other jurisdictions. It's sort of a group tool for reviewing and commenting on plans, allows you to make notes right on the plans electronically. We believe it will shorten our time and it will work well for the consultants' applicants, or the consultants as well. Standards. we need to complete and update our engineering standards to provide the most up-to-date standards so that the consulting engineer knows what cross-section to use for that particular street section or what curb detail to use. Those change from time to time. We do our best to stay on top of that, but we do know that this is something that we can do that will make a difference to the outside world. And then finally, I think on the list is code amendments. We all recognize that there are opportunities to modernize and or fix some code problems. For instance, one that's popped up here recently is our building height definition, which I won't bore you with the details, but I think it started off well-intentioned 10 or 15 years ago. We've now seen some problems with how it's actually implemented, and we think we can make it simpler and easier for us and for them. So we'll be working on that here relatively soon. So this would be the revised one. At the PreApp size, what we've decided is we want to reinforce the value of the PreApp with the applicants. We're not sure yet on staff whether implementing mandatory PreApps is the right way to go. We see value in it, but there are times when maybe that wouldn't work for the applicant. And so we're still talking about that at the staff level. And we're still discussing whether we would recommend to the council that we drop the fee on the PreApp. I've made note of the multi-department technically complete review. We think that'll be better initial submittals, and we're using the unified meeting to do that. I've replaced those two meetings in the middle of the flow chart with the unified meeting. That is already implemented, well underway, and I think we're starting to see the benefits of that structure. And then again, our goal here is to get rid of this do loop of resubmittals through the better technically complete review process. It's too early to tell whether we're at that stage yet because we just haven't had enough things come through the pipeline that we can start to measure, but that's our goal at this point. And then what happens afterwards? One of the key things that you learn through this process, it's not a one and done. You don't just get to the end and say, well, that was good. Now we're done with this. Kaizen relies on constant review and improvements. So this acronym PDCA was shared with us, Plan, Do, Check, Act. You can see this sort of graphic. You start off small, you make some changes, then you check to see how that all worked out, and you might make some changes again, check to see how that all worked out, and this is over time. As we go over time, our quality will improve. Rapid fire drive-by initiation to development review and Kaizen. What questions can I help you with?
Thank you. Great overview. As far as the fee goes in the pre-app, how much are we talking?
It's about $4 something, I think, right now, $4.20. And again, you get that credited towards your application fee.
Is there a way to incent them to do a pre-app, which it sounds like makes sense, with either discounting it up front or giving them some other type of credit at the actual formal application if they've gone through a pre-app? So we still get the money up front, but we give them...
Well, what we do is if they do a pre-app and then they come back and file the formal, we subtract the amount that they paid at the pre-app for what they owe us for the formal. So they do get a credit for that.
So maybe could we incent it up front? They get a slight reduction up front, they still get the credit. Let's say it's normally $400. If they do a pre-app, it's only $300 and they still get a credit for that.
Maybe.
Of course, I guess they're not getting as much of a credit if they wait. But
yeah.
if they wait and pay it, I don't know. There's just got to be a way to incent them to go through that process. It's good for everybody.
We truly believe that it is because the goal of the pre-app is for us to learn about your project and for you as the applicant to learn about our code and our knowledge and the big ticket items that we see. Because most consultant engineers, architects, they can read the code and they can figure out how different things apply. But they may not understand what the unique aspect of the sewer is in that particular location, or that we've had this particular issue with storm drains in the past, or that there's kind of a weird wrinkle in the zoning code here, and this is how this really applies. So the value in the pre-app is you share your idea with us. We give you back big picture comments, say be aware of this, be aware of that. Ooh, this is an issue for you. And hopefully that helps you as the applicant form a more complete formal application. Some people choose not to do that. Frankly, some projects are so simple that whether the pre-app is valuable or not is probably debatable, but that's a very, very small percentage of our projects.
Anyone else?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So just from what I've learned previously and the additional information tonight, it seems like it would make sense to make this a requirement because those who are averse to doing this will still get that back. So if we are charging them for a pre-app and we're worried about that cost being a detriment, if they go forward with the project, they get that back anyway. And it sounds like, and the question I was going to ask, thank you for answering it before I asked it, was what percentage of people would this really not apply to? It sounds like a very, very small percentage of projects would not benefit from having this pre-application process.
Yeah, I think that's true. Our common response is, gosh, this would be great for a pre-app. Gosh, this would be great for a pre-app. The one potential incentive that we could think about, again, is just going no fee. Just remove that as a perceived barrier. Now, that means that when it comes time to pay the site plan fee, they're going to pay the full fee. But does that make a difference to somebody? Not really sure. It's hard for us to know. Maybe it's an issue of perception of time. They feel like they don't have the time to go through that process. Kind of like the old Fram oil filter commercials, you can pay me now, you can pay me later kind of a thing. Getting that information up front probably benefits them on the back end of the timeline because it may probably shorten that up.
Ms. Nossinger?
What is the big time for the pre-app? Is it just organizing the meeting and then, yeah, I mean, what is the,
Actually,
what does the pre-app look like in
we-
reality? Is it a one-day meeting and just talking, or what? I've never. seen
That's a
it
great
before.
question. It's a much scaled down list of submittal information. And we do everything possible to have a meeting with you 3 weeks after you give us that information. And so that's fairly quick turnaround. So the fact that we get it on this day, we get it out to the staff, they look at it, do their thing, get ready, then have a meeting. It's a 3-week turnaround time, which is a pretty quick turnaround time.
Mr. Wiesner?
Thank you. Mr. Powers, I've been involved in, as you know, with you several pre-app meetings and have left them with, very lengthy lists of invaluable knowledge to allow a project to move forward. It seems to me like the only folks that may not feel as though they would receive a benefit from a pre-app meeting is somebody that's seemingly in a time hurry and typically is probably going to lay an application on us, which is probably going to take a little bit more of staff's time to get to technically complete point. Because I do find those meetings, being able to leave those with an idea of what we need for technically complete applications. So if anything, maybe the incentive is a non-incentive, right? It's an additional fee for a submittal without a pre-app. It gives those contractors the option that feel as though timeline doesn't allow for the pre-application to go ahead and proceed, and just understand that staff's going to be putting a little more front load time into the application that would have been done obviously through the pre-app, which would have been incentivized by getting a refund of those pre-app fees. So just a suggestion to consider.
Yeah, that's a great idea to look at. One of the things I didn't say, the other value of the pre-app is that sometimes people are still trying to make up their mind whether they're going to do a project or not. And so another one of our main goals is to give you enough information so you can make that go, no-go decision. And we've had lots of people, once they've learned about the challenges with that particular property or the challenges with that particular business or industry that they're trying to get to at that location, they've come to a conclusion, gosh, that's not for me there. And we think that's really valuable because if they do that at the formal, they spend a lot more money with architects and engineers getting us the information that we need. So that's the other huge benefit that I left out for the council, is it helps somebody decide before they're in too deep, yes, I want to do a project, I think I'll pass.
Well, and I know how extensive those reviews are. I mean, each of the departments weigh in for those reviews. There's a lot of time put into them. So I'm afraid of the flood, quite frankly, if we don't have some sort of a fee for it. I mean, the reality is, you know, we could get flooded with folks just kind of throwing things off the wall to see if they're sticking.
Sure.
Or not. And the reality is, on the other side, I don't want to have a steadfast obstacle to that developer who comes along and says, hey, I need to get going on my project. I want to proceed. I don't have time for the PreApp, but, you know, we shouldn't put up those types of obstacles. You know, we should have a path for them to be able to proceed to do that. And if it means putting up a little bit more money to cover staff's time that they're going to spend in trying to get a technically complete package together that could have been spent early on.
It's a good suggestion. I'll take that back to the unified meeting. We've got a great forum to have that conversation, and we'll roll that around.
Thank you.
Mr. Powers, so when they're nosing around about putting in an application, there's a checklist of things that they need to have
Yes.
done.
Yes.
If it is a contractor or builder, whoever, that has done a lot that thinks, oh, I've got this down, but if there is a code change or state, you could alert them. Is that something that you make them aware of when they think, I don't need this PreApp because I've built X amount now, and they haven't heard of anything that changes? That would be something you would inform them of, I would
Yeah,
believe.
we try real hard to do that with our repeat customers, and the best example of that is actually on the builder side. Because by the time it comes to the building plans, we're not doing PreApps on those as a general rule because the buildings just aren't that complex here in Oak Harbor. But you may not be aware that we've just adopted the new code cycle. Or maybe you're aware of it, but you don't know that with that new code cycle, there are these huge changes in the energy code, right? And so our building staff, for example, as the city council is getting ready to adopt those codes every 3 years, they work hard to tell their repeat customers, hey, we're getting ready to adopt such and such IBC, such and such energy code, and you need to know that they've changed this or they've changed that, and the standard is going to be this or that, or it's that much harder to meet this new energy code provision. And so we try to give people as much advance notice as possible when those things are happening.
Isn't there also a timing that, I can't remember which state mandate it was, but if they got in by this certain time, then they still had the old rules.
That was
but
low
after this
impact
time-
development.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that
Okay.
was when we needed to adopt those standards before the end of 2016, and they went into place on January 1st, 2017. And so we worked hard so that the developer community knew that those changes were coming in place. And we did see a couple applications that came in under the wire. And admittedly, one or two of them were a little premature. And they weren't quite as ready as they or we would have wanted them to be, but we helped them along so that they could stick with the old rules.
One more question. When you have repeat builders or developers or whatever, and there's something coming down the pike, I know for some other things in the city, we've kind of sent out a blast saying, hey, are you aware that this is going to change things as of this date, and then they can come in and find out more information?
We worked hard to use the low impact development as
Okay.
an example. There was a fairly extensive outreach to the engineers, developers, and builders who had been working in our community in advance of that. Some of them were asked to participate in a technical advisory committee so that we could try to help them learn about that. So to the degree that we can sort of narrow it down to something like that and share it with people, we do that.
And to go along with that, we do still have some learning that needs to be done in the community. So I think Public Works is working on some more outreach and some more training opportunities, inviting engineers to become more fluent in learning about the standards. And the more they know, the more that they can submit, and the less time we have to spend on reviewing and explaining what the new requirements are. So you'll see some initiatives coming out on that.
So I guess maybe to conclude in this particular topic, staff is very much aware that time is money on the building and the development side. And so we do everything that we can to move people through the process as efficiently as possible. But as you saw in one of my earlier slides, we can't be responsible for the whole time frame, the whole efficiency conversation, because there are chunks of that work where we just don't have a hold of it. And so that's why we work as hard as what we do to help them be as organized as they can be.
Any other follow-on questions?
I have the next one as well.
Go ahead.
And this will be much simpler, I think, and a little quicker to go through. Land use approvals and the hearing examiner. This was something that we first talked to you about in September, and sort of presented the idea or asked the question, basically, is the council interested in changing a portion of your land use approval process and primarily getting yourselves out of being the final decision maker on some applications. And so there were some questions that came out of that session. So the goal today is to more clearly present the existing and proposed process, address any questions that you have, and then hopefully learn a little bit more about what your preferences for next steps might be if you want any next steps. Oh, thought this was going to be a little darker than this. All right. Well, these charts were in your packet. So down the side here, my numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4, again for permitting. I've got example, is public notice needed, public hearing required, decision or recommendation body, final city decision, and outside of city appeal body. So I've got just some basic examples in here. Type 1, again, simplest, building permit. Public notice, nope. Hearing, nope. Who makes the decision? That's the building official. His decision is appealable to the hearing examiner, and by our code, the hearing examiner has the final say for the city of Oak Harbor. If anybody wants to appeal that decision, they need to file a LUPA at Superior Court. Type 2, I've used the example of short plat, so I can compare that to type 4 here in just a moment. That's 9 lots or less. Do we have to tell the public about it? Yes, we do. Do we need a hearing? No, we don't. Who gets to make that decision? Well, it rests in my office, but obviously it's input from everybody. But that decision is appealable to the hearing examiner. Again, he has the final decision, and if somebody feels aggrieved by that, they go to Superior Court through the LUPA process. Type 3, I mentioned earlier in the previous presentation, those are conditional use permits and variances. In this case, the example is a drive-through lane at a restaurant. Do we need to notify the public? Yes, this one requires a hearing. Hearings by the hearing examiner. He makes the decision, so he's the last step here. Again, you can see what's happening in this far right-hand column. That takes us to class 4, or type 4 of the permits. This is a preliminary plat, more than 9 lots. Notice to the public is required. We need to have a hearing. The Planning Commission currently conducts that hearing, makes a recommendation to the council, and the council, after a closed record review, it makes the decision. Any appeals go to court. Council's had 2 examples of that here fairly recently, where you've made those decisions on preliminary plats. Planned residential development, which is processed with the preliminary plat, has the same answers in all of these boxes, if you will. And then the last category, or last example I have for you of a type 4 is certain site plans, for example, more than 35,000 square feet of commercial space. That requires public notice and a hearing before the hearing examiner. He makes a recommendation to you folks, and you make the final decision after a closed record review, and the county is the place where the appeal goes. What I was trying to describe to you last time around, didn't quite do a good job, was the difference in these and what we were actually talking about in particularly changing. So the rest of the table is the same except for the red text. And what we're really asking the council is, would you like to see the hearing examiner be in the role of being the decision maker on those preliminary plats, PRDs, those certain site plans that he already has the responsibility of doing the hearing on those site plans? Shift the hearing process as well as the final decision to the hearing examiner. The outcome would be the same in terms of an appeal from the city. That still goes to county court. The advantage to this is that we have an individual who is trained in land use law, acting in the capacity as the judge, making the decision as to whether or not the rules are appropriately applied to this particular piece, this project, and you are removing the emotion from the issue. It is a dispassionate person who, by our code, doesn't reside in our community and is a trained land use professional, etc. So I think that was the last slide. I'll leave it sit right there.
Questions, anyone? Mr. Reeser?
Mr. Powers, so presently now, the process is we're going before the planning commission, which would no longer exist. I mean, that's
Oh, we still need the planning commission, Mr.
for,
Reesner.
and that's for long-range planning, or?
Yes, so our comp plan amendments, all of our comp plan stuff, all of our code amendments, they're the main body that helps us review and update the shoreline master program. They're the ones that helped us update the design guidelines. We have plenty of work for the planning commission.
They'd be able to focus on the things we really need them to focus on.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And presently, planning commission meeting typically takes place, once or twice a month?
We have once a month.
Once a month. So when an application comes in, it's a month, could be a month before, in fact, I'm sure it's 6 weeks before it goes before the planning
It's
commission?
much longer than that, because if you remember.
Well, when you get to the point where the planning commission's ready to schedule.
Yeah, then it's, roughly-ish month, 6 weeks probably. It all depends on when it's actually ready, or is it ready just before this particular planning commission, which means it's way out here, or, but yeah, I would say a month to get it on once we know it's ready.
And then if the planning commission needs additional information, it's another month.
Correct.
And then they make their recommendation, they forward it to city council, and it goes on council's agenda
Within 14 days.
within 14 days. So we've got a minimum of what sounds like the 6 to 8 weeks, and
At the shortest.
okay. The hearing examiner process, let's talk about the time frame of that, because we just got done talking about, of course, time's money for the
Yep.
builders. So, we got to think, obviously, the developers too, and think about streamlining our process. And
Sure.
and it sounds like maybe a way to do that. Scheduling time for the hearing
It usually
examiner?
takes us a week or two to figure out when we can get onto his calendar.
And then he then schedules the public hearing, notice goes out, how far in advance does that have to go?
We have to do 15 days. So what we do is we get the available dates for the hearing examiner. He says, I can be in Oak Harbor on this Monday, this Friday, this Monday. Typically, those are the days that he meets here. And we pick the soonest one that works for everybody. Sometimes the applicant wants a particular one. And then all we need to make sure is we've got enough time for the notice in advance of that date. Yeah.
And then his decision is made,
Oftentimes it's made that day. And so now with more complex things, that he might need to take it away and study a bit. But if it's something where it's not that complex, the applicant is in agreement with the staff recommendation and the staff conditions of approval. The hearing examiner frequently announces what his decision is from the dais and says, you'll have my written decision within 2 weeks. If it's a circumstance where he needs to study the information, maybe there was a bunch of information came in during the hearing, he'll tell us, you'll have my decision within 2 weeks. So either way, you'll know as an applicant within 2 weeks of that date, but you might know that day before you leave the hearing.
so we have another opportunity to cut, again, another step out of the process and cut that time frame in half, and be doing so with I think what the state has said as the hearing examiner is the utmost authority in land use decisions, I think is the way I remember reading that they have ruled, because obviously that's what they're trained in is land
Correct.
use decisions.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
you bet. Other questions?
Singer?
I guess not so much a question, but my thought, I feel like cutting and no, this is just in the utmost respect, I think that taking that off of the planning commission, some of these type 4s is not a bad idea. And giving that to the hearing examiner. I think that that's a good idea. Also, for the final decision, I am okay with the hearing examiner doing that versus council. I feel like our onus should be on making sure that our municipal code is written in a way that follows our, we spend hours with you going over zoning and neighborhood plans, and so we, that to me is maybe where I would like, for me, my focus as a council member to be, to making sure that all of that is on point and
Setting the policy.
Exactly,
And then help set the
exactly.
regulations to implement the policy.
yeah, so, I think it's a good idea, the way that it's written there in the red.
Mr. Larson?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Yeah, we've talked about this for a number of reasons. It will streamline the process if we go this route and we afford the hearing examiner the authority to do this and become an integral part of this process, vice the planning commission. We've also looked at not just what do we prefer, it's what is the wisdom of others in the state. I don't mind being set aside from the herd when we're leading and we're advancing the charge and we're being the vanguard, but in this case we're not in step with municipalities who are doing this via the hearing examiner, and all the evidence points to that is the right way to do it. It is more expeditious. It also puts the person with the most experience and who really ought to be making that final decision in that position. I don't see a downside to going this way, and so I would hope that that is the way we move forward, is to make these changes and place the hearing examiner in that decision-making role.
Thank you.
Any other comments? I have one. Long time ago, and we have not gotten back, our sign ordinance. And a church, actually Smith Methodist Church, and how their zone is residential, but yet commercial is all around them. We got city building here, we've got a house here, we've got the church here, and we've got businesses here, but yet they're residential. So they wanted to make a digital sign out of the one that's sitting right on their church. Instead of going out there in the rain or whatever and the wind blowing off the letters, they just wanted to be able to do it digitally, black and white. They're not allowed because they're in residential. They were told if they go to the hearing examiner, he's going to look at our code and say, sorry, it's not in code, wrong, you just wasted your money by paying to go to a hearing examiner. Sometimes as council members, we don't know where we should be making options because we never hear what the hearing examiner says. He just makes a ruling, it goes on, unless they complain. So when we used to have to, it was boring, but you went through and you saw the plat, you understood what they were doing, but also how decisions were being made. If this goes, he'll be presenting code, but we really don't know how it's working. Somehow there's got to be a compromise because we're approving code and stuff, but yet we don't have any real life how it's working or if there's options that are needed. Yes, it would be nice to take the emotions out, but okay, Lehigh, I assume the hearing examiner, when he got done, he wouldn't have said, staff, do you have any reason not? There were some good reasons people factually listed. I was very interested and curious, an attorney that went line by line and an FAIA architect, and there were others that listed things, and yet there were no comments of his made towards anything that they listed that he could have said, yes, on number 3, you are correct, but because of this situation, I didn't see anything. So I didn't learn anything from the hearing examiner, and I felt like part of the process was just opinions. And so maybe we need a new hearing examiner or we need new rules on one thing. But sometimes when you see the process, you understand better. We get a lot of code and what the state is mandating, and we try to support the staff, and we think, okay, we got screwed on this one. You know, they're putting us in a category we don't fit because you've let us know the science, supposed to be scientific evidence on how different things, but
So
if
then,
we're going to be intelligent enough to be able to do the code, somehow we have to be involved a little bit in the process to know this is why this is it. I mean, if you don't see an example fit in there, then you don't know how it works. So I don't know what the compromise is. I'm not ready to say
I think we could come up with
all
one.
hearing examiner, because a lot of us don't have building. A lot of us don't. We have different strengths when we come to fill these seats.
So maybe the compromise, Mayor Pro Tem, is to separate the decision-making process on permits from the conversation, is the code meeting the needs of the community? So on the previous presentation, I listed as one of the code amendments that we know that we want to do as a result of thinking about these kinds of things is building height. And let me go into that example for just
Okay.
a moment. It says in our code that building height is calculated from the average grade from the four corners of the lot, right? So if it's a steep slope site like this, you create a middle point, and that's how your building height works. Well, that's worked fine for quite some time, and we thought it was working well, but we've had a couple of examples here recently where it's a fairly steeply sloped site. They have multiple buildings. There are 4 or 5 apartment buildings on there. And if you apply the height definition through all of this, you end up on one side of the site having a building that gets too tiny because you can't make it stay underneath the height limitation. So the workaround for the applicant is to create 5 new parcels from this one parcel, so that now we're not measuring from these 4 corners, we're measuring from these first 4 corners, and that's how that building works. And that's how this one works. There's an example where we're going to be able to bring to you, hey, here's how this code isn't really working well for us, and here are the ideas as to how to make it work better. I think we can do a better job of that for the council, so that you know from a comp plan to a development regulation to a permit, how are these rules really working? Are they implementing our community vision? And are they actually working for the people who are trying to achieve a project rather? So I think we can do that for the council, and I would just suggest that you can separate this quasi-judicial decision-making from making sure your code is what you want as a community.
Mr. Larson?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Yeah, I agree, and I thank you for that distinction, Mr. Powers, because this was if we're going to use Lehigh's example, that was an example of where, and what I want to say for the record is that whether it was this hearing examiner or any other hearing examiner, we got what we paid for, and he made the decision that he had to come to based on the law. So if we're talking about, it wasn't a popular decision, it wasn't the decision that some people would have liked, it was the decision that should have been arrived at by any competent authority in doing that job. So I don't want people leaving this meeting thinking, oh, well, if we had only had a different hearing examiner, because I don't believe that to be true, and I don't believe that we were done any disservice by the hearing examiner that we utilized for that process. So I wanted to say that up front, because I don't want that to be the impression that we leave. But moving forward, I think it is our responsibility as the council to look a little closer at our code and to ensure through the application process, which as you guys are looking at this in development services, you're seeing the workarounds and the ways that we can get creative before it gets to the hearing examiner for that final decision. So I think with our process the way it is now, we have opportunities to get creative. And if our code doesn't allow for that, then it is our job to address that in the code. And that is one issue. The other issue is when all that is said and done and it comes time to make the decision, the hearing examiner, I still believe, is our best and truest option moving forward. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, unfortunately, hindsight is 20/20. Lehigh's example of that, where we didn't have a definition for the multiple use and what had to be, and we turned around and did a moratorium, put a temporary hold on that, and we'll probably come up with a definition on that. So I think we want to be as proactive as possible, and certainly, but I think we're going to learn from development coming through. And the other example, more positive one, was the height issue, just not really working on it. And staff's kind of talked about that. One of the challenges, you'll see more property coming in that has more challenges with it as we tend to infill. So that makes it more difficult for us to do it. And so you end up with things that are more difficult to work with, and more complexity with stormwater, and more complexity. And so that's been a trend we're dealing with. Somebody said all the good stuff is already built, so some easy stuff. And so,
All the easy stuff.
easy stuff is already built. So you'll see some developments coming through that's more challenging. The one with the apartment complex is one example, and continue to get that kind of stuff.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Finance.
Oh, thank you.
Yep, I certainly will. Okay, you're the waiter now.
So I'm here to talk about the options for Wi-Fi at the city facilities in Windjammer Park. We started looking at this after Councilmember Servadius brought this subject up, and have actually met with Councilmember Servadius and our IT providers, and decided that the best solution for the city would be to make it part of our RFQ that we're doing for IT services for 2020. We have put the RFQ out. This is a copy of it for you to see. It's out since the end of October. The bids are due back by December 2nd. We've already had 3 IT companies want to visit it with us. 2 of them already came. We're meeting with one on Monday. So we will be getting a very varied look at the market. So we'll see what's going on. And in here on page 4 of 17, at the very bottom, in RFQ, we listed some things that we want them to include in their managed agreement. One of them is installing the 2 servers. Our current IT has not been able to get to that due to a lot of cleanup that they've had to do, a lot of documentation. They came in and it was triage for the first 4 to 6 months. And now we're getting to the point where we've replaced significant, I think we're down to almost having all of our older computers and processing systems replaced for 2020, because that's when Windows 10 has to be in place. And so the servers will we figured it would just be better to have them quoted as part of the new RFQ to see what the market is for doing something like that. The other part was the city Wi-Fi. Currently we have city Wi-Fi that the school district gave to us as a hand-me-down quite a few years ago. So it's significantly outdated and doesn't have the capabilities that we would need if we wanted to extend it out into, say, the park at Windjammer or the park at the skate park. My hope is well, the plan will be the Wi-Fi will be provided by our fiber connection, and then it will be across the city, because currently the marina is on with Comcast. They are separate from the city for their Wi-Fi. The goal is to get them in with us as part of the city Wi-Fi with updated equipment, with the technical term escapes me, but there's things you put out in areas for broader coverage. I just heard the term, but I've forgotten it. No, it's something else. But anyway, and there's ones that work really well at marinas that they were a couple of the potential quoters have talked about. So the answer to this is it is going to be a priority for 2020. It's going to be part of the managed care services of whoever is the person that obtains the services for the city after we go through the process. It could be interpreting tech. We have nothing but good things to say about them. But because it's city dollars and we want to be good stewards, we're putting it out to ensure we're paying the right market value for those. So this is just for you to review to see exactly all the things that IT provides us. It's quite an extensive list. And it kind of gives you an idea of what's all going on at the city. So I thought it would be helpful for you guys to have. And if you have any questions.
Questions? I have one.
Sure.
Senior Center is not listed. And you would think that,
They're part of the overall all departments.
okay.
So unless they're
Okay.
really specialized, like police is and fire, they have special like co-ban for the cars. They have just typically, finance isn't listed, we're just part of the overall city. So it's just the specific departments that have some specialty stuff that are listed separately.
Okay. Other question? Can I say hooray? Let's get this going.
Yeah, we're excited.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Public Works. We've got the dual team, all right.
Anyway, we're here here tonight to talk about the Kroll on-call services contract. I had too much turkey for lunch. Give you some background. Kroll has been providing engineering services for the clean water facility since 2010. Done an excellent job for us. We're kind of coming to the end of the project. As part of their work, which is not really engineering, it was more control system engineering, they actually implemented our SCADA control network. We were very successful with it. And with the project past completion, Kroll has exhausted their previous contracts amounts. We've stretched their last contract about as far as we can stretch it. I'm quite happy with what we got out of it. But right now they're out of money. Though the construction is complete, we feel the need to continue support with SCADA operations and a few warranty issues. We're still bringing some things to completion. So we'd like to have a new on-call contract with Kroll in the near future, just to assist us with whatever questions and whatever issues we have going on. To talk about our SCADA services, our SCADA system is a large computer network, requires ongoing support like any IT system. We've always anticipated in our budget and our rate models of outside services, a specialized service. We can't afford to have our own in-house expertise. Frankly, Kroll's knowledge of our system and rate structure is very cost-effective for our system. We have a very well-documented system, but if you try to bring somebody else in, their learning curve, and my experience in the industry is we're getting a better rate on the actual service for a programmer from Kroll. So I feel their service is very cost-effective as we move forward. Like I said, the system itself is working great. So their system support for us would include software upgrades, just like any computer system. Our SCADA software does upgrade. Troubleshooting, if we have a control issue problem, we do that. If we want to do modification to the system, say we want to change the control strategy and the software, we can do that. We need to interface with our actual IT system. There's how we get in and out of the system through VPNs and stuff requires some assistance. Vendor coordination, because we have 27 computers talking to each other, and so like the computer system for the membrane system, they have their own computer talking to us, so that's kind of a complicated dance sometimes. And operator assistance in terms of if they have a SCADA problem, they need somebody to talk to. They have provided us 24/7 coverage for the last 2.5 years now. We used that a lot last year, but we very infrequently use that now. Our support is mostly remote, so they can actually log into the system and make the changes online, though we're going to have an occasional site visit to talk to the operators or do a hardware change. Operations support services, I want to compliment our staff. They're doing an excellent job of running this treatment plant. It's a complicated device. We brought it up, and they're doing an excellent job. After a year of startup, while we're doing a good job, we're still developing an understanding of the treatment system. We're getting good results, but we think we can do better. We're still in the process of resolving some final warranty punch list and other issues going on. Our dryer system is in its operational infancy right now. We've operated it continuously since Labor Day, and we're getting the results we need out of it, but it's been a learning experience. And unfortunately, our relationship with the manufacturer due to financial issues is pretty tenuous right now, so we're not getting a lot of support.
I have a question on that. So I do see every once in a while some complaints about the smell.
Yes,
Is that the dryer system?
that's the dryers.
So what do you see as the ongoing
We-
future of that problem? I mean, to me, it's really hard when my constituents
And-
complain about the smell. It's hard for me to take.
We
really.
we have actually stopped the odors from the system on an interim basis. That was part of our problem. When we started continuous operation, we had to learn the system. And Corolla, quite frankly, came in and gave us a lot of help, even though they were out of budget, to get the system running. So while we're getting odors, we've actually incrementally reduced them substantially over the last 2 months. And we were at a point where we met last Friday to talk about, okay, how are we going to stop this? We know how to stop the odors, and we actually did it Friday. But we do have some more things to do, and some of it is pretty simple. We're thinking a big part of our problem is going to be solved by buying some fancy furnace screens. But working through that problem was a mechanical issue. It had a lot to do with the airflow and that type of thing. And frankly, we needed some very specialized help to do that, and Curl provided it with us. And like I say, they were out of budget, but they stood up for us and said, yeah, this is an issue we're going to stay on. So the dryer has been a big issue to us. I think my personal confidence level is pretty high. And I talk to a lot of people about the odors, and I'm the first person to want to stop it, because while we've made some improvements, any odor is too much odor. And
Can we do anything about the noise coming out of that dryer unit?
the noise we're experiencing with the dryer is actually the strobic fans, and that is something I want to look at.
Pretty loud in the car.
It's pretty loud in the park, and that's from the ventilation systems. And like I say, as part of the interim solution, we turned them off for a while, and it's been made a lot of difference. That's where we have to go back and evaluate, because those fans are providing air circulation in the room. As an interim solution, we've turned off that air circulation so it can get pretty ripe in that room, but we have long-term health and safety concerns, so I'm worried about dust. The odors we're experiencing are not from the dryer, it's actually from the dust we're creating from the biosolids. So as we move it around, even though we have some pretty good dust removal, that dust carries, and it's like a time-release capsule in your nose.
Maybe we could time those fans to operate.
That's one thing we are looking at pretty seriously, and that to me is, we've talked about that last Friday as the potential. So we don't run the dryer on weekends, for example, so you may see the dryer operation. We're trying to get part of the operational optimization we're talking about is getting the dryer up. Right now we're running about 4 days a week. We'd like to get it down to 2 days a week, and so we can do things like that. So that's where we need the help. So our goal next year is to optimize the operations to save costs. We're spending on electricity, natural gas, and chemicals. We've got a good first year. We know we're successful at it. How can we make it more efficient? And having their expertise on it. Like we have one issue right now with the aeration basins, blowers. We have this control system that's not quite working right. So we have to go back and figure out what's going on with the control system, get back to the manufacturer, and it takes somebody who really knows what we're talking about in terms of backflow valves and air systems to do that. So that expertise is valuable to us. And so if they do that, they'll assist them with warranty and punch list items. Those are starting to get few and far between, but we still have some, we have a warranty issue, and it's kind of, okay, what is the issue? We'll assist them with troubleshooting, resolving any new issues. Occasionally something pops up. Something's not quite working right. We're scratching our head, so we go through troubleshooting. That's oftentimes done with a phone call. Like I say, assist with the dryer system finalization. I think that's our big goal. I think we see it. We have the light at the end of the tunnel, but we still have some work to do. And assist with our plant process optimization. We want to save some money, and I'm hoping the money we save is going to pay for itself very shortly, and we'll be able to maintain that over the years. So anyway, we're proposing a new on-call contract. We're not going to do any more amendments. This will be a brand new contract. It'll be funded through ongoing operational funds, not from project funds, so it won't be a capital project. We'll be anticipating regular visits, but those services will be on demand, so we're not expecting to see, they will respond to our needs and let us know, so that I'm hoping to keep the costs down. Right now, we're estimating the SCADA services for about $78,000, the operations support about $57,000, and the contract term will be for 2 years. Questions?
Questions?
So the 78, oh, sorry.
Let's go.
Great, go ahead.
So this is 78,000
Yeah.
plus the 57,000
It'd be about one-
per year, or is
No,
that
just
total for
for
2
2 years,
years?
yeah.
Okay. And do you anticipate, I mean, I always expected and knew that there was budgeted for ongoing maintenance of the plant, of
Yeah.
course. So do you think that this will be
The
ongoing?
the 78,000, that
May go
will,
down.
well, that's probably going to be ongoing
Okay.
for us as we move ahead,
Yeah.
because
Because we
Yeah.
need to have that ongoing
Yeah.
technical support for the computer system.
For the life of the,
software.
yeah.
Yeah.
We have a similar thing in the water fund. It's a different company, but it is their
Yeah.
programming and.
But yeah, like I said, I always knew that there were gonna be, you know, so these are things that are budgeted, these are things, and when we do our
Yeah.
rate study for the ratepayers, are these things that
yeah,
are sort of have been factored
Yes.
in the long
Yes,
term?
They are in our operations budget.
Okay.
So, they're not part of the clean water facility capital project anymore. These will be in our operations budget ongoing, and that information has been given to HDR.
And it's in our current.
and
budget.
actually,
It's in our
in the
budget.
previous rate studies, they actually have this line item in there.
Okay, and so we're just seeing it because it's just a new,
Yeah.
We're moving into a
You
new
know,
phase,
normally we wouldn't.
getting out of the construction project and into ongoing
Okay.
operations.
Okay.
Mr. Svadius first.
The SCADA software, is that something that is custom to our, there's gonna be some customization, but are there vendors that design this software, and are we using a vendor's software?
Yeah, we are using a vendor software, is manufactured by Rockwell, which is a division of Allen Bradley, which is a big electrical manufacturer. All of our electrical equipment was standardized on Allen Bradley. So our SCADA software talks to our, we call PLCs, which are the logical, which actually talk directly to the motors and to the motor control units.
So do those vendors provide some of this support?
What happens is they provide you an overall software, and that's the beauty of this type of software is, say we want to start a pump, that how that motor works is, I'm going to probably get a little nerdy on you, but that depends on control inputs and a certain logic. That logic is very specific to that equipment. So, and how that equipment talks to each other. So how we run a pump or how we run a blower is very specific to our operating strategy. So that part is very customizable. The basic software itself is something that's adaptable to a lot of equipment. So it's a hybrid of what you're talking about, but it's not like your computer where, everything is done by the computer. We actually have to put some thought into what we're doing. And there's a lot of risk with that in terms of we turn on a piece of equipment when it shouldn't turn on and it blows up. Part of our problem with Harslov was the software. We were having things break on us, and turns out that one piece of software wasn't working. We fixed that and the problem went away. So again, it's customizable, but it's very specific to our operation.
I'm just curious, I guess the bottom line was what Corolla does that the vendors could be doing, or maybe should be doing, or.
The Rockwell sells us the software, they don't sell us the programming. And that's the thing about SCADA is you take this program and and we would have had to hire some vendor to do that for us. We chose to do it with Corolla for a variety of reasons. The biggest one was cheaper for us. And like I say, there's other people that can do this type of service, but they're a lot more expensive, and most companies they want to build the stuff, they don't want to maintain it. So their charge for maintaining is usually a lot higher.
Mr. Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. the estimate that you got up there, is that a not to exceed, and we're charged per call?
It's it's charged on T&M basis like we've done with all our services. So, for example, we need to, we're going to try to keep it as remote because we don't want to pay for travel. But yeah, if we decide, we've got a problem here, we call them up, the meter starts ticking, and they've been very good about that, I might add. But it will be a T&M, and there's assumptions, so many trips per month and that type of thing. Hopefully we can cut that back.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Arvison, when this comes to council, since we were missing members, it might be helpful if you kind of give a review that in the last 3 months remotely they've been able to do this, just so that they're kind of on a catch-up quickly instead of they've missed all of this if they don't choose to look at the tape or something like that. I mean, it's one thing to see the price, and you've talked about, well, not so many visits, 1 month it might be 4 and another one it's...
The effort...
If you'll just kind of throw in some numbers, I think that would help as far as the agenda and understanding everybody on the same page when they've missed some. Oh, does Ms. Rosen have something for us? No.
For the next time.
Oh, for the next one. Oh, man, I thought you knew exactly what I was going to say. Okay.
I'll try to bring a little bit of explanation because, up until last summer, it was startup service, so there's a lot of things. So the basic maintenance costs, actually have gone down quite a bit, but we're still doing stuff. And when you want them, all of a sudden, we were fighting with some software in the dryer. We had to get into the machine and go in the back door. And so that was, we had to go call the guy down, Jeff down in Walnut Creek, and he logged in and got into us. So it's one of those things, when you want them, you want them now.
One more question about the odor. I know we have that one building that's the odor scrubbers, but that's just for the process.
No, actually,
the
odor scrubbers work for the dryer.
Too? Okay.
And part of the problem we've had is how that whole sound system balances. And so that's one of the things we were able to track down, is we were having some balancing issues between that. The odors actually weren't getting to the odor scrubber. And it was kind of one of those things we had to track it down. All of a sudden we saw this coupling start ballooning. We're saying, what's that? And that was a big part of the problem we found. So, but it was a technical issue that we had to get to a certain point before we could understand it.
With the calls you've gotten and I've gotten just a few, but not as many, would it help to put on our webpage some little blurb about, hey, the dryer or whatever, we're adjusting? I mean, just something that you could say, hey, if you check our website, it'll kind of tell you what's happening. Or so. I mean, I know it's time. Somebody has to take the time to put it on the website. But the more you get information out, it seems to make it easier for people to understand, going, oh, that's the dryer, that's not the process or whatever.
We actually talked about that last week, and I had a big meeting with Kroll, and we brought some. And so what I want to do is start making a promise that on such and such a day you will not smell anything. Up till now, we wanted to be careful about what we said because we were still tracking it down. As of last week, I feel we've got it kind of tracked down and on a positive path. So we do feel, Kathy and I have talked about it, is we need to get a statement out saying, we appreciate your patience with the odors, and while it's not, we're working on and doing it, and by the way, we are going to eliminate it. And we ran it Friday and Monday without odors. We didn't run it today because of lunch, but
when we went to Vancouver, they have a flag, certain colored flag, and they only have one odor scrubber. And when it's down for repair or whatever, they put that flag up so all the neighbors go, okay, cancel any outdoor parties, drinks on the veranda, whatever. But it at least helped because they weren't going to be able to build another building, put another one in. So if we could think of something to let the public know, at least you can direct them and they'll kind of know what's happening, and it's not such a big mystery.
And my goal is to get rid of the odors, and I think that's our team's odors. And like I say, it was a learning curve for us, and frankly, Harslov has not been helpful. And to give our guys some credit, is we were figuring this out as we went, and we actually got bad advice from Harslov, and so we made a lot of improvements. But it's down to, I think we've got it down to, we think we got it under control, but it took us 2 months to figure it out.
And that would be, to me, okay. I mean, it's the truth, and to tell the public. I mean,
Thank you for the update.
yes,
Yeah.
but thank you very much. That was great.
We've talked to a lot of people, and I talk to people out there, and they're patient with me. It says, get rid of the order, but please.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Marina, youth sailing program.
Oh, wait, no. I think we're on the
No?
You missed engineering.
Oh, engineering, sorry. Wait, whoa, sorry. Skip. Chris thought he was going to get out of here earlier. Dang it. I didn't need to slide to engineering department. Sorry about that. Did you get these passed around?
Okay, we're going to give you a brief overview, and it's a high-level discussion, just kind of an introduction on our Stormwater Comprehensive Plan, which is being worked on now. So it consists of 7 different chapters. It's very similar to our water system plan, transportation plan, those kinds of things. This one just happens to deal with stormwater. The first chapter is the introduction and goes through the purpose and goals. It's a planning document which is intended to provide guidance to minimize the adverse effects of stormwater runoff on ground and surface water. It also helps us to ensure that we maintain compliance with the government regulations such as the Clean Water Act and our NPDES Phase 2 permit. And the primary goal is to provide guidance to preserve and protect the water quality and our hydraulic system within the city's natural and man-made stormwater drainage system, and protect our receiving waters, which is Oak Harbor Bay and ultimately Puget Sound. Chapter 2 talks about the drainage characteristics within the city. It describes the local aspects, topography, soil type, our existing infrastructure, climate, tides, waterways, the receiving waters, critical areas. They've talked with our staff about frequently flooded areas. They look at the wetlands, drainage basins, zoning, and land use. And they use that for modeling. Then they do this modeling of our system, and they analyze our existing stormwater system and its ability to accommodate runoff from current conditions and from future developed conditions. So that gives us a list of projects that we may need to do in the future as development occurs. It also includes a review of the previous reports and plans that we've completed. So we've completed a couple of these stormwater comp plans in the past, and it looks at those. And then it models that. One thing that is new in this comp plan that we think is going to be helpful for people who are developing in the city is that we have created a map. I think it was Gideon did the mapping of it, of the historic Gary Oak Prairie. And, at our last workshop, we talked about Friend Marsh, and I mentioned that DOE requires us to use second growth forest in the calculations for determining runoff from a site that's proposed to be developed. Even if it's concrete today, they want us to go back to second growth forest. With this map of historic Gary Oak Prairie, properties that are within that area will be able to use a prairie instead of second growth forest, which will reduce the required flow control storage volume in those areas. So this is going to be a good thing for people who are developing in that area.
Where is that basic area, just out of curiosity?
What's on the water, and it goes, there's 281 pages here. It's gonna take a minute.
Just in general.
It goes pretty farther north than you might think. We still find occasional oak tree. I know there's one up off of Easy Street actually, but Gideon spent a lot of time researching, looking at old photos, and it's a larger area than most people think.
And so it's
I-
just,
I don't
It
have
starts
it
kind
memorized,
of where
sorry.
and goes to Easy Street, sort of, where does it
No,
start?
it does not go all the way
Okay.
to Easy Street.
Okay.
Probably should have put in
Okay.
this
That's all right.
bunch. I can maybe at the end.
So-
I can-
Sure.
Let me go through this and while he finds it, and then he can pass it
Okay.
around. Okay. Chapter 4 is about water quality, and it discusses the water quality pollutants, their sources, and the water quality regulations. And as you know, we have to comply with the Federal Clean Water Act. There's also state regulations, water quality criteria for marine surface water, and then we have our specific MPDES Phase 2 permit for stormwater. And the parameters of concern related to water quality are things like dissolved oxygen, pH, temperature, turbidity, nutrients. You've heard Brett talk about nutrients as it relates to wastewater and wastewater treatment plants. They are also talking about that related to stormwater, DOE is. So at some point in the future, we may have to address nutrients. And then bacteria, oil, grease, those kinds of things that are in stormwater runoff. It also discusses water quality treatment facilities and the NPDES Phase 2 permit requirement to plan for water quality and/or flow control basin retrofits. I've mentioned this in the past, our new permit, which came into effect on August 1st of this year. We've got to look at a lot of information and then start planning for stormwater basin retrofits to provide treatment and remove pollutants from the stormwater before releasing it into the bay. The primary planned treatment project, retrofit project that's been on our list for 20 plus years or so is the Friend Marsh treatment project, which is in our budget. We're also looking at other possible retrofits. We've talked about the marsh on 7th Avenue. That we purchased some property that we're hoping off of Easy and Coochie that we're hoping we'll be able to do a retrofit project. And staff is also having the consultant look at a possibility for providing some stormwater treatment in our favorite project, the Passaic sewer line. So. Chapter 5, operation and maintenance. This talks about our requirements for operating and maintaining our stormwater system. Discusses what's necessary for the operations and maintenance portion of our NPDES Phase 2 permit. And the staff training, our public education and outreach, as well as the documentation and reporting requirements. Chapter 6 is the capital improvement plan. So they go through this modeling, look at future development, and model it and see where we might need to have capital projects. And they've come up with a short-term and a long-term list. This is looking out 20 years of growth. The short-term list, and we're is probably the most important. So we've got the east outfall repair that's budgeted this year. The Goldie Easy Street vicinity conveyance, we purchased 2 properties, one off of Goldie and one off of Easy, and we're working on that as a treatment, flow control and treatment project. That's budgeted. The west outfall pump and spill control vault, that would be over near Beeksman near the car wash. And that design is in our current budget, but not the actual construction. That's a couple years out yet. Friend Marsh retrofit feasibility study, that's budgeted, and we'll be working on that in 2020. And then we've got these other projects that are on the short-term list, and when you look through your budget, you will see several of these in 21, 22, maybe out to 24, 25.
Ms. Rosen, on your Westfall pump spill, the design budget, sometimes there's a shelf life. That design won't change? I mean, whatever your design comes up with within the 2020, when we do the construction, is there not has to be done once that design is done within 5 years or 3 years? I mean,
Yeah, if I remember correctly, the actual construction part is in, I want to say 2022. So
Okay.
it's only a few years out.
Okay, just kind of want an idea. Thank you.
And then chapter 7 is the financial analysis, and so we've given HDR the list of capital projects, our estimated O&M, and they are crunching those numbers right now. So to look at and include those in the rate analysis. And is this it? Do you want to pass that around so everybody can take a look?
So on the rates, sorry, just jumping in, it's enough time to figure out, so it won't be a surprise that people are getting, oh, guess what happened to your bill? That we'll be able to explain, validate it, and slowly put it into the system on the HDR when you're figuring out the rates for maintenance stuff?
As I understand it, HDR will be here at your January workshop to talk about the rate
Okay.
analysis work that they've been doing for all 4 utilities.
And in April of this year, they came and they did the presentation. It's not going to vary much from that, but all of the new things that have occurred in the budget and after the budget are being input into their model to make sure that what we're looking at will ensure we are able to support operations, any projects, as well as make sure we have a good fund balance for emergencies.
Any other questions?
Okay, so our schedule for this project actually started a couple of years ago, and we had some staffing changes. We had some other capital projects that came up that took higher priority. We've had several large development applications which have taken away from the limited staff that we have. And we wanted to wait and see what the new stormwater permit looked like so that we could address it. We didn't want to have a document that was already outdated a year after we adopted it. So in December, we're going to be bringing a no-cost contract extension for Gray and Osborne to extend it through March of 2020. No cost. We'll bring it to the Planning Commission in January and to the council by the second meeting in March of 2020 is our schedule. Any questions?
Any questions on the side of the table? All right. Oh,
One real quick, so I guess looking at this, so that's favorable because the original Oak Prairie had higher runoff, so they have to retain less than
Yes.
Evergreen. Is that overly simplistic, or is that?
Yeah, the pre-development, the DOE has a model where you're required to use second growth evergreen forest for any development, whether you're tearing down a building and parking lot, doesn't matter. That's what you use for your pre-developed condition when you compare it to your proposed development. And so evergreen forest is essentially a sponge. The prairie has more runoff, so when you compare those two, the amount that the developer must store is less. So it decreases the size of flow control DMPs such as detention ponds or vaults.
Thank you.
any other questions? This is, in a sense, sort of got a new classification with the prairie, because I don't remember hearing it before, so
Well,
Yes.
I approached
staff won the
DOE.
battle.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
approached them and I spoke with them, and this is a victory, I guess. It helps protect our system, but it also helps
Right.
economically for developers.
Thank you very much.
That are developing in that specific area.
Yes, I know, but I meant
Throw that
it's,
out
It's a big area.
It is,
we've heard how we've been classified just because they don't come and see and they don't seem to always like our best science, which puzzles me. But thank you, staff, for being due diligence, the tenacious bulldog. So I feel like this is a huge victory. It's not everything, but we're getting to them slowly, right?
Yes.
Any other questions?
This down.
Thank you very much.
This down.
Okay. Friend Marsh.
So I thought I would just do a very brief update on this. There was a question from Councilman Almberg at the last meeting, and it kind of caught me by surprise, and by the time I realized what he was asking, he had left the meeting. I realize he's not here, but I thought I would provide some clarification. And then there are a few other items that I think deserve some discussion. So as we stated last meeting, most of the property is listed on the National Wetlands Inventory Map and our critical areas map, and we've contracted with ESA Adolphson in 2007 to delineate the wetlands, and they identified 2. So there's the National Wetlands Inventory Map, Critical Areas Map. You saw these at the last meeting. There's the Adolphson wetland delineation. Mr. Powers, this is not new information, but Mr. Powers reminded us of something that occurred in 2012. And that was when the city updated their shoreline master plan in 2012. DOE, a different part of DOE than we deal with on the stormwater, but still Department of Ecology, identified the southern portion of the east ditch as part of the city's shoreline environment. So this is a map that Mr. Powers has provided to an applicant as well as staff, and this additional information needs to be considered when DOE is out making that determination regarding whether or not that east ditch is flow control exempt or not exempt. So I wanted to let you know that this exists, and it will be taken into consideration in making that determination. Yes, sir.
Can you remind us of the color coding again?
So the yellow is, the regular sort of yellow is, for lack of a better phrase, normal residential shoreline designation. This is our public facilities shoreline designation, and this is the wetland open space shoreline, or wetland designation associated with the shoreline. So this yellow is telling you that this is our normal residential as opposed to, say, the Bluff Conservancy residential over on Scenic Heights. And that the same standards that apply here generally apply back in here as well. There are some distinctions, but that's the difference in the color coding. Just as a real quick aside, we were almost at the end of the adoption of our Shoreline Master Program in 2012. When Ecology shared this information with us, the council at that time directed us to engage Ecology to say, in essence, are you sure? We went back and we asked those questions, and they said yes. They actually checked the salinity again, and they concluded that this portion of that ditch is something that we need to designate as part of our shoreline environment and then apply our shoreline rules to that.
Thank you.
So on the, which one is it? Is it this green one? I don't want to turn it, I don't want to turn it off. I don't want to turn it off. So this is the pipes from the east channel, so this is shoreline. So the question that Councilmember Almberg asked when I talked about the requirement when you're looking at your pre-development conditions that when modeling your stormwater runoff, you use second growth evergreen forest. Mr. Almberg said, why would we do that when it was a slough? Well, we're talking about the property that's being developed, not where the stormwater runoff is going, and that's the difference. That's why I wanted to bring this up, because we're not there is no development plan for the old slough area, and DOE does require second growth evergreen forest, at least until we adopt our stormwater comprehensive plan, and then we'll also have Gary Oak in certain areas of the city. And that's just what it looks like in terms of post-development. So I've added what's in yellow to the summary that you saw at your last meeting, and that is that the southern portion of the east ditch has been identified by DOE as part of the city's shoreline. and needs to be taken into consideration when making that determination regarding flow exempt. So we have, as I just mentioned, we need to do that. Representatives from DOE are going to be here in town on December 6th to perform a field inspection of the site. It was scheduled a few weeks ago, but the mayor had asked that we reschedule it. So we rescheduled it now to December 6th. I've reworded the bottom bullet. You saw something very similar at the last meeting, but I want to be clear that future developments, and this is not any specific development, but there are several properties that can be developed that will eventually get to Friend Marsh, and they may convey their stormwater through the channels in the marsh, but they may be required or must control their rate of flow because they will be coming through a system of stormwater pipes that are already in existence that have some capacity limitations. So in order to protect the system and not inundate or overtax the existing stormwater pipes, there may be some future developments that are going to have flow control just because the existing system can't handle it in terms of capacity. Nothing's changed there. And are there any questions on that update?
This may be a really silly question, but you know, if we want to promote this infill and the growth, urban growth in our city, and that's a big area to have our stormwater go through, can we do a capital project? Do we have something planned to increase the capacity to make so that it's or is that something you want to do? I don't know the big picture. I don't know. I'm not an expert on stormwater, but if we're wanting to develop and do we want the stormwater to go there in the first place? Would we want to increase the capacity, or is there a way to do that?
Well, it would mean tearing up our streets and putting in bigger pipes.
So it's not just, it's pipes
not,
that go where? Like all the way, a lot of streets we're talking about, or
yes.
I don't know the...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it could involve a lot of capital costs and probably more than a developer could afford. It's probably less expensive for them to give up some property to build some sort of detention facility. Mm-hmm. And that happens all throughout the city, not just Friend Marsh. We have stormwater pipes all over the city that if development didn't provide some sort of flow control, it may overtax our system.
You have a question?
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Now we're to the marina. Huh?
Now it's time for the...
Yes. Mr. Sublette, would you like, I know Mr. Scooby is involved with it, to be up here to help answer questions, or you've got them all?
If you're comfortable, that's fine. If you'd like to join us, that'd be
Go
fine.
ahead.
So this is Mr. Byron Scooby. He's the chairman of the board for the Oak Harbor Youth Sailing, and that's what we're talking about today is Oak Harbor Youth Sailing. Oak Harbor Youth Sailing is a program that operates out of the marina. You might see them in the summer in their little boats.
Every Thursday,
Yeah,
right?
that's right. And many other days too,
Yeah.
which is kind of neat. It's really popular with the kids. Their classes typically sell out. They used to do an adults class that was very popular that Mr. Scooby led himself. They're also part of the Oak Harbor Wildcat Sailing Team, which is an up-and-coming thing that's had a lot of success in its early years. So it's really exciting. In order to operate a program like that, it takes a ton of equipment. There's a lot of little sailboats, a lot of sails, just the stuff you would expect to see. There's also what we call chase boats, which are inflatable boats that range in size from about 12 feet to about 16 feet or so. They're rather large. They do currently rent 3 sheds from us, but not everything is fitting in those sheds. And if you go to the east end of the marina at the end of Building 3, you can see where a lot of this equipment is stored, namely the chase boats, which is a major concern. Recently, Oak Harbor Youth Sailing came to us and made a proposal to have a 18 by 40 foot steel building installed right there at the end of building 3 where all the little sailboats are stored. And the main purpose of this building would be to store the equipment and the chase boats. And potentially they may also give up 2 sheds in this process as well, but this gives them a bigger footprint. In their proposal, they're saying that they will pay for the building to be built, and then once it's constructed, they'll donate it to the city. So it'll actually become a city building. And this will be a conventional steel building that you would see.
Sorry, can you bring that up it's on page 18 of our packet, just so that everyone is looking at the building that Mr. Soto was talking about? Sorry to interrupt, but.
Sure, no problem. Once a building's built and they donate it to us, then we'll execute a formal agreement for them to use it for their own exclusive use for a designated time. We did discuss this with the Marine Advisory Committee at the October 7th meeting, and they did not have an objection to this at all. So, be happy to answer any questions. This is something that we're targeting bringing to you at the 2nd December meeting, I believe it's the 17th.
Question from Ms.
Yeah,
Foster.
I am, obviously I am such a supporter of all youth programs, activities, anything to get kids outside and doing stuff. And to me, barring any limitations with the area or building plans, that I'm sure staff will ensure is all correct. I don't see any difference in this than what the city does. The city lets soccer and little league and football use all kinds of storage spaces all over our parks.
Sure.
I know that, so I think anything as long as it is within the building rules and fits, I don't see any problem with it. I think it's a great idea. Thank you for all you do for the program.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Svadius.
Thank you. Full disclosure, I've had 3 kids go through the program. And 2 still involved with Wildcat Sailing.
That's a conflict of interest. No, I'm kidding.
I'm heavily biased and supported. I'm just curious, if we do end up getting the Mariners, what's it called, Mariners Haven? Mariners Haven. Before we anchor this thing and get it, established and built with whatever to put the FJs and all the boats in there, might it be better suited over there somewhere so it's not as far for the kids could get in and out of the water quicker?
Yes, that's some discussion that Mr. Scooby and I have had, that once we acquire that property, that this would be moved over there. This is basically a kit that's put together by a company, and this is what they do, and it's bolted to the cement. So once it's built and installed at the end of building 3, it's a pretty simple thing to have that company come back, dismantle it, unbolt it from the cement, and move it over to Mariners Haven.
And do we know we don't know, does anyone know Mariners Haven?
Well, I think on the issue is we've got a lot of hurdles to overcome in that project, and so I think it's better off to do this project and have the ability to move it. So it's going to be, we talked about that before. We've got 3 studies that have go, any of these processes that we have kind of blow up, it may not become cost effective to us. So we're doing the appraisal, the environmental, and then the business plan. So certainly I think it's worth investigating, and it's a good question, but I think they'd rather focus on what they know now, and we could do this, and I think they've already, and you're right, it would make sense to move it if we were able to do that.
Yeah. So, no, I support it. Obviously, thank you, Byron. You've been a tireless volunteer for this program.
Mr. Larson.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Yeah, it's not just a win-win, it's a win-win-win, because the city and the marina win, the club wins, and the kids win. I really appreciate the time and effort that you guys have put into bringing this to us with all the facts and figures, and it's, unless there's something that I'm missing, it seems like a no-brainer, so I would wholeheartedly endorse moving forward with this.
Thank you.
100%.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's get to it.
Have a nice evening.
Administration.
All right.
You have no helpers?
No helper.
Okay, oh, man.
I have one in the background here. so.
Okay, all right.
My first issue here is the options for Wi-Fi in the central business district. Staff was directed to look at Wi-Fi, providing Wi-Fi in the downtown, the central business district, and also Windjammer Park. Already discussed the Windjammer Park component that we're just going to dovetail into the upgrading of the city's hall Wi-Fi. When I did speak to the Main Street, I guess Wi-Fi has already been in there according to them. Tried to have some follow-up meetings with them and I wasn't able to schedule them. And I asked them, because I know that they looked at this quite a lot and did a lot of studying on it, asked them if there's any way that we can help them. They've never gotten back to me, so I'm considering the issue closed unless the council wants to give me further direction.
Questions, comments?
No, if they've solved it all, I have to go down there. Do we know, is it MSA or something, or what is it?
I mean, I asked if we could dovetail on it or anything like we want to do. And even if we were to pursue it, I'd want to go through the contract with what we're doing now in technology services and piggyback off of that rather than try to do it as a standalone project. So, but I assume you got it from the initiative from the Main Street, and so they're not really giving us any information or impetus to ask them to help them. So. If they do that, I'll continue to monitor that, and if they want some assistance from the city, I think we'll be open to that.
Any other questions? I'd be interested if there's a way to help promote it. I mean, we're competing against Burlington Way when they say, hey, you can be driving down the street and you can get Wi-Fi, and you really can from their city. So I don't know how they worked it out, if it was with the businesses or what. But I mean, there's a lot of cities that are promoting that when you drive certain streets or you're in certain downtown areas, you can pick it up. And it's almost like people feel it's my right to be able to get Wi-Fi. It isn't, but that's exactly the attitude. So if there's a way we could help at least promote it, they don't want money or connection or whatever, I don't see why we couldn't at least offer that. I would at least keep asking the question, maybe.
Yeah, even though I'm closing it, if they bring up and that's something they want to pursue and they want us to partner with them, so certainly willing to reconsider that.
Okay.
Or maybe it's something we could do when we, get our park Wi-Fi's going and, like, hey, it's, I know that they're separate, but do it as a package, like, wow, we've got Wi-Fi in all these cool places where people gather.
Sure.
I agree with you. Like maybe just to feel like a sort of like a PR. This is what we've done, and just another amenity for our visitors and public. It's great.
Yeah, the Windjammer would be a good test for us in doing that, and so and then trying to reformat the way we're doing the marina, so we kind of have a standardization, and so if there's a push it into the Main Street, then certainly we'll look at that. But as far as my 2-month requirement, I'm assuming that's met. so there, and then we're not going to probably meet the 2-month requirement for the Windjammer, but that's going to be part of the whole RFP process, and so that will be a major focus, and you'll see that come up, but it'll dovetail in all the other issues we talked about in upgrading our city-wide Wi-Fi and just dovetailing that in there. And I think the good news is it'll have expansion opportunities for other avenues, including the central business district, if we want to go that route.
Alrighty. Legislative priorities.
Legislative priorities. I have a nice slideshow for that. I'm going to grab this here. So, this was a really team effort here in putting this together, and so it's nice to learn a lot. So, I think the topics last year I was fairly new here and just grasping them. Now I have a really good grasp of the topics. Kind of the goals here: simple, eye-catching document, present to state representatives and senators. So I've done it to all of them, state senators and the federal representatives and their key staff, and so it's a really good document to help there to kind of cover some of our priorities. And then we looked at some of the priorities of the Association of Washington Cities. And then it's kind of divided into two focuses here. You'll see is the front page focuses on concept, and then kind of use the word tangible goals. So that's why it kind of, you looked at 8 of them. That's what we're focusing on here, and I'll just kind of go through. Everything ties into the mission statement. So like we did last year, we started the page through the mission statement, and so I can also pass this around. I forgot here. So the slight version, a little bit of a modification I'll notate from what's in your packet. And then we kind of go, the first one on there, on the first page is the workforce housing. It's a big priority there, so I think that talks about partnership with state and Island County to address the housing crisis, continue the pursuit of resources and policies to increase workforce housing. So legislature did the one thing with the tax credit issue that we've talked about. And I think something that I think we want them to continue to help us to work on workforce housing. And I know this is a major focus of the chamber. I'm also on their legislative priorities committee, and so I have some experience with what their kind of objectives are too. So moving on, economic development. Interesting enough, I came from a state that had tax incremental financing. That's something that's coming back that they brought up, not me. So it's called TIF, and it's a real powerful tool. But we have in our Constitution a prohibition of gifting of public funds, and so we're giving a way to incentivize the developer to do economic development. But it is a powerful tool. Touch on some of the areas with the Public Works Trust Fund. That's similar to what we did last year. AWC really supports that, funding that. And then we added broadband access for rural communities. So with the feasibility study, with conjunction with the Port of Coopville, and then also with the wet fiber within Porter's, kind of wanted to work that into the equation. So moving on to the next one, environmental sustainability. We kind of collaborated on various things that we're working on there. The stormwater has been an issue. We had that last year, but one thing that's new on the horizon is the recycling crisis. So certainly something that has to be addressed at the state and federal level to really address that concern and the difficulty. And we're going to be dealing with that painful issue of recycling costs going way up and deciding whether we want to continue with it. So that's why we added that on there and kind of rebranded it a little bit to capture a number of categories. Next one, behavioral health, pretty much the same as it was last year, and this correlates with the AWCs here. Reforms improve overall mental health and drug abuse. A lot of our homelessness is a result of people with mental health issues and drug issues, and so a lot of the vacancies that they do and issues are related to those problems and that really need to be addressed. And I know state did a lot of emphasis on it in their past budget, and so hopefully we'll start seeing some results on that. And then next to the next page, flipping it over. Just starts off with a glance, just kind of gives an overview, helps the legislative officials that we provide this document to kind of know who we are, some of the key components of the city here, commercial and industrial center, on SR 20 corridor, largest employer, one of 2 municipalities own marinas in the state. That makes us kind of unique. And then largest community waterfront park on Whidbey Island, so Windjammer. So just kind of touch on some key points that make us unique. Then we kind of, this wasn't on there, we talked about adding this last year. We added the Navy on there and kind of put it into the 3 main areas. The area in yellow there is the area that we kind of wordsmith the documents there a little bit to kind of make it more sense. So that's the area that's a little bit different than the packet. Same kind of theme. Clean water facility connection, I think, is a major focus, and I think we passed a resolution to supporting the Navy, so it kind of captures that too. So I think it does a good job of capturing the three main areas that we want to focus on for the Navy. Next there is the approved SR 20. That was one we kind of added at the end there. I think we really want to encourage the accelerated or planned improvement of SR 20 in Oak Harbor. It's a bottleneck on the island, and so and I think we've got some real opportunities with our legislature strategically placed to get some good benefit on that. And so we want to work with the Island Regional Planning Organization to try to take the lead. The IRTPM is what it stands for, to take the lead on that. So I want to make sure it doesn't happen any later than 2027. But really, I think it's in our best interest to get that done sooner. But one of the things I found out is we've been planning for those intersection changes for 20 years, so over 20 years. And Todd Carlson with the DOT, I mean, just his whole career he's been planning on it. Steve's been planning on it for a long time, and it just would be a lot easier for us to get it done. It affected the Windjammer project there, so we didn't do some of the streetscape that we might have done because we didn't know what was going to go in the interchange there. So the sooner, or we're kind of doing a pause right now to waiting for something to happen, and sooner it happens, I think it is better for the city. So it's a good message we can send to the legislature to ask for helping us in this area. Marina revitalization, this was kind of new, but we do have a number of things going on with grant funding. We already talked earlier about the acquiring the boatyard, so we have some pending grants on that. So a lot of good areas that we can focus on the marina, so we went ahead and added that on there. So, and then park and recreation is kind of an ongoing issue here. So certainly we've got a phase 2 of Windjammer Park coming up. Want to continue that designation as a perimeter water fun attraction, and then we have the regional park that we're going to be looking for grant funding for as we continue to develop that for the next 10 years. So long term there, so we wanted to focus on that project. And then really what I guess I'm looking for is feedback on the council. Kind of like to finalize this by November 25th so we can get it out in our packet. Assuming there's any input, we'll make some changes in it, and the goal is to bring this to you formally in a resolution on December 3rd, and then the legislative session starts in January, and we'll use this document as one of our visuals that we present to our legislators when we lobby them and ask for their help.
Questions? I have a comment. Get this to them before session starts, because once session starts, it becomes a blur. They need to have it before they even go down to Olympia, because it just helps our cause that much better to be calm. And if there's any way, even if it has to be one-on-one, get them to come here to the city, whatever council members can be here. But being able to tell our story, I have seen through the years, helps a lot. But if you can get it before they get into that fray, because they really can't hear. It's nice that you go and get the check in the box, but that's all it is. You made an appearance. They are actually working and writing bills right now for the session. I mean, it is constantly, if you get any of their legislative stuff, their caucuses are already working on bills. And if we want some of that money, we need to let them know, I would say, before December 31st. If we get this approved, then try to get it as soon as possible. You snooze, you lose.
Yep.
Don't want that for us.
Well, already a lot of these topics we've already talked to
Right.
them on, so we've already had a lot of communication on it. So, but it just really helps in having this really nice visual aid. So it's a good thing. It's interesting because the COG, Council of Governments, asked for priorities, and we kind of could show them, oh, here's our list, and the rest of them kind of had to jot them down. You'll see it in the packet there. Some of the other municipalities, and we already had it, and I could just present it to them. So because we were ready to go, and it's easy for us to define what our priorities are. And so certainly there will always be, it's hard to capture everything. This is the crystal ball of what we're looking at now, and we'll add other topics as they come available. So a small cell tower was one we had on last year that we just didn't feel it was the priority, and so we dropped that off. And so this will never be inclusive, but I think these are 8 key areas that I think we can focus on, and they'll probably resonate through the years. So.
Question? AWC is meeting on Friday, December the 6th, and I can mail, or if you want to mail to them before that meeting, they would have this because they will approve their legislative, but as long as their advocators, educators, lobbyists have this, then they can pull it out because they will be advocates, whether it's on their particular list or not. It's the fact that they know. But they are approving that on Friday, the 6th of December.
Yeah,
So-
one of the things, as soon as we finalize it, we send it to them, and they keep all the
Yep.
city's legislative priorities, and so I think we're pretty adept, and staff's pretty good about following through on that. And we'll send it right to our legislators, and we'll follow up with them and give it to them multiple opportunities in working that through. So I just really want to appreciate, this was a real team effort here, and department heads and city staff, and kind of making this look really good, and wordsmithing it, and really kind of focusing on these 8 key areas that we want to focus on.
Be sure to thank Seth, because I know a lot of work went into this, especially the wordsmithing.
Okay, I can go on to city administrator's
Go ahead.
report. We can wrap this up. So if you can go ahead and pull that out, or pull it up in the screens there. City council, we put out information on the retreat coming up with Mike Bailey from the MSRC, doing that on a Saturday. So any questions, follow that up with staff, and continue to highlight that date. Moving down to Arts Commission, you have in your packet is the October Created Arts Fund report is attached, and it's something you've asked for, so you can kind of keep track of the financing there. Moving on to economic development, Anacortes Wet Fiber, we've got some opportunities there that will be coming to the council there on kind of focusing it on less complex issue of water projects, and then it'll have the opportunity to dovetail into the more complex issues of being a broadband project. So there's some telemetry issues and some benefit of putting the fiber, and we're just discussing with them with the Sharps Corner to the bridge. Some more to come on that one. The Marathon 2020 registration is now open, and we're doing some discussions on possibly getting that onto the seaplane base. So hopefully we'll be successful with that. Moving on to development of services. I was informed that the Island County approved the JPA Oak Harbor consideration on their calendar. That's right, Steve? So major
It's on their docket. They haven't
Docket.
approved a new one.
Okay.
docket, so.
Easy, Joel. Yeah. It's all on Twitter.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But we did some lobbying on that, so I appreciate the effort on that. Some council members made a trip with us to the county board meeting to advocate that, so appreciate that. So the marina fuel supply pipe replacement is scheduled for November 19th, 7 to 14 days, so a nice little project there. Some good work on restarting the salmon rearing program, so it's kind of an exciting thing there. Some good coordination with the school district on that. Finance department certainly has been highlighted previously, but I think we want to highlight the clean audit there from the city, and congratulate the finance department and completing and being part of that clean audit. RFQ going out on the clean water facility final project, December 3rd. You'll see that on the calendar there, so that's part of the whole closing of the clean water facility. Then moving on to human resources, I think October 31st had a great wellness and health expo at the clean water facility, so got a lot of good positive input of that. And then moving down to the police department, they're working on some remodeling over there, so moving things around and improving their, the way things are situated over in their office and trying to increase efficiency and to accommodate some expansion. Public Works Clean Water Facility is, and my monthly financials are in there as long as in my packet and along with the Windjammer Park financials. So people talk about that and ask about that, and we have it every month, continue to provide that information. Harbor Heights, making some good progress on that. I've been informed that the applicant has done the illegal dumping cleanup, and staff is looking to secure the environmental testing and the survey, and I think that's about all we have left and to do within our 90-day approval process. And I'll take any questions you might have.
Questions? I guess you convinced us.
That'll work. Thank you.
All right, seeing that we are over time, thank you staff for being diligent and showing up. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Council comments?
Oh,
Yeah, we weren't over time.
We were
Like, we're almost right on.
7 o'clock is what my schedule says.
5 minutes early.
7:15, okay. Any council comments? Sorry. You better have one, Servadius.
I
Okay.
shouldn't want to cut anybody out.
Okay, sorry. My mistake. I apologize. New at this job. Thank you very much.
My back is ready to be out of here.